Well, good morning. Welcome to the April version of the Morning Steve Rosansky Show of Wake Up Newport, or Wake Up Rosansky, I guess. I'd like to welcome you all to another informative session this morning. And so it is my absolute distinct pleasure of bringing to the dais the mayor of the business community, Dr. Steve Rosansky.
Thank you. Doctor, my mom always wanted me to be a doctor, but I went to law school instead. Good morning. As Rush said, I am President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, and this is our monthly Wake Up Newport meeting. We've got a great speaker for you in just a minute. So with that, I will turn it back over to Rush, and he'll introduce our speaker this morning. Thank you.
This morning, we're very pleased to have a good public servant with us, Darrell Johnson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Orange County Transit Authority. And that is a 1,400 employee agency responsible for programs that improve our mobility throughout the county, where we have over 3 million residents. Under the direction of the OCTA's 17-member board of directors, Mr. Johnson is responsible for more than $1.2 billion worth of an annual budget, implementing the planning, financing, coordinating of Orange County's freeway, street, and rail development, as well as managing our countywide bus services, commuter rail services, paratransit services, and operations of the 91 Expressway. Since becoming CEO in 2013, Mr. Johnson has focused on utilizing innovative financial methods to maximize our Major M funds. Orange County's voter-approved half-cent sales tax for transportation improvements. By 2020, more than $3 billion in OCTA projects will be under construction at one time, including the $1.9 billion widening of the 405, I think, which all of us have had the opportunity to experience. The largest ever undertaking by the agency, by the way. I've heard the largest program in the state as well, and I think that's something to say to have as one of your projects at this point in time. In addition, Mr. Johnson is spending a great deal of time reinventing the Orange County transit system by delivering different types of services and programs that improve efficiencies and enhance the passenger experience. And those include things such as overhauling the bus system and adding a community-based transportation system. I think he's going to become the Uber of the public sector in on-demand type of transportation projects. He represents OCTA on both the local and the state and the national level as a strong representation in Orange County. And this morning, we're going to hear some things about the 2019 initiatives of the board for which he works, as well as freeway improvement projects that are under construction and the M2 local projects. So please welcome Darrell Johnson. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. You know, when Steve asked me to come today, I was happy to say yes, but given that it's sort of a national holiday, at least in the Johnson family, which is Angels opening day, I was a little worried if I could do everything in one day. But I'm happy to do that. I've got my Angels jersey and hat in the car, so I'll be there at opening day tonight. But does anyone remember if it's rained on opening day before? In recent memory? We've got a 50% chance of rain tonight. So I know you didn't come to hear about the Angels, but that's on my mind right now. So anyway, I'm very pleased to be here. It's been a few years since I've been able to have the opportunity to speak to this group. And so I want to cover some of the things that we're working on today, try to give you a sense of the things that are in our future, and also make sure that there's time to ask any types of questions that you have on your mind. And the way I like to do it is nothing is off limits, so anything you want to ask is fine. And I'm very pleased to see the high school students here. I'm glad you're interested and got up early. I have two high school students myself, and they're not big fans of getting up early, so you guys get extra credit just for being here today. So I want to talk just a little bit about what OCTA is, not spend a lot of time on it, but I think that one of the things when we think about Orange County is we think about a county within the state. We have 58 counties in Orange County, or in the state of California. There's only 3 counties that are structured from a transportation standpoint the way Orange County is. And by that I mean we have all of these items under one umbrella. Prior to 1991, there were 7 separate agencies trying to do some type of planning or transportation delivery in Orange County. That was consolidated legislatively in 1991. That had a lot of ongoing operating cost savings, efficiencies, and decision making. Since that time, one of those agencies has sunsetted, so now we have 6 agencies under one, functioning as one. And only us in Orange County, Los Angeles County, and then Santa Clara County in the Bay Area, in the San Jose area, are consolidated like that. So if we looked at what is San Diego doing, for example, in transportation, there's 2 transit agencies, there's a planning agency, there's a local sales tax entity, there's sort of 3 people doing what I do, there's 3 different people being the chief financial officer of different various entities, and that goes on. And I think that by doing that, we get a large program of activities under one sort of policy direction as well as management direction. I think that serves us really well. And this is the type of things that we do. I think first and foremost is the Regional Planning Agency. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's in our plans and what we plan to do coming up. We have a multimodal focus on what we do. It's everything from the freeway system, which I'm going to talk about a bit, the local streets and roads, transit. And transit, we look at bus, rail, paratransit. We look at motorist services, the roving tow trucks on the freeway system, and the toll lanes, which I'm going to talk about, the express toll lanes, as well as some of the active transportation and administering the local sales tax measure, which really gives us the opportunity to make world-class investments into our transportation system. And on that for a moment, with about 3.2 million people in Orange County, our population is bigger than about 20 to 21 different states in the US. So there are 20 states that are smaller in population than what we have in Orange County. So that gives us a pretty unique challenge in trying to fit all of our activities in one space. So then we talk about the investment we make, and in fact, our annual budget of between $1.2 and $1.5 billion of investment in transportation, that's independent of what the individual cities do, by the way. That puts us in the neighborhood of bigger than about 15 to 16 different states in terms of their annual Department of Transportation on a statewide level of investment. So there's a lot of things that are So putting that sort of in context, I wanted to talk today about a couple of the bigger projects that we have going on and how we're trying to deal with the future of not only transportation in Orange County, but this idea that we have growing population, we have higher density, we have a lot, our job market is changing a bit. And when we look forward over the next 20 years, what we see from all the different cities about land use, about housing, and about jobs, we see about 400,000 people being added to the county over the next 20 years. We see about a 15% increase in housing. We see about a 17 to 18% increase in jobs. If we didn't do anything with that, if we just left everything the way it is today, we would see about a 77% increase in traffic congestion. And that's unacceptable, obviously, on any scale. So the things that we're focusing on are trying to react, if you will, to what we know is coming around population, housing, and employment. So I want to spend a moment on something that I think is getting more and more important, particularly in urban areas. It's what I call solving the transportation puzzle. And although this is a pretty simple graphic, I think it illustrates the process and steps and importance of some key things. So when I look at this is the way I think about how we deliver large projects. So first you need a good idea, right? That's the light bulb in the puzzle. We need a good idea. And not every idea that's thought up by OCTA or a local transportation entity or a city is a good idea. But when you get a good idea, you have to go through that and make sure you understand it. You need to make sure it has a technical aspect to it. You need to figure out how to fund it. That's always a challenge. And funding is different than financing and is different than how you ultimately pay for it over time. But this third one, I think, is really important, and that is your partnership and your stakeholder outreach. Because you can have a good idea, you can figure out how to fund it, but if your stakeholders, which could be your city, it could be your local community, it could be your neighborhood, it could be down to a block on a big street, if they're not involved and they're not supportive of it, then you really need to do some more work in that area. And then finally, you guys can all think if that's Washington or Sacramento on any given day, but the regulation, the rules, the legislation that allow us to do those things. So Any one of those things that sort of get out of whack or get out of place makes it very, very difficult to deliver the solution. So as we think about, particularly as we grow as an urban area and we have more and more people and our county gets a bit more diverse, how we think about delivering the projects and how we think about funding the projects and how we think about selecting the projects, I think gets more and more important. So on that, every 4 years, OCTA, working with the Southern California Association of Governments, which is SCAG, we develop a long-range transportation plan. And it's a 40-year outlook that has a lot of things in it. And it's aspirational in one sense, but it's also realistic in another sense. So when we put our plan together, what our board adopted last fall is a 40-year plan, has about $43 billion of investment, and that's the dollars that are reasonably expected to be available to us in the county over the next 40 years. But 40 years is a long time, and it's good to have that plan. But what I've liked to do over the last few years at OCTA is be a little more precise on what we're trying to deliver in a shorter period of time. So what I've been working with our board on, and the board every fall for the last 3 years has updated a rolling 10-year delivery plan. And why I think that's a little bit different is it commits very specific funds and it commits very specific projects to a delivery schedule and timeline. So it's a little hard to wrap your head around $43 billion over 30 or 40 years. It's a little easier in the infrastructure world to wrap your head around what are we going to build in the next 10 years? What are we going to get underway in the next 10 years? How are we going to pay for it in the next 10 years? Where are the funds going to come from? And what are the projects going to be? So those puzzle pieces I talked about a moment ago sort of lead to this, right? So this is our delivery plan, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a moment. And this is really focused on our half-cent sales tax known as Measure M here in Orange County. And what the board approved at a high level was last fall is that over the next 10 years, we will make available to the 34 cities within the county, plus the county of Orange, right at $1 billion for street and road improvements. So that's $1 billion on top of the normal traditional gas tax that comes to the cities, and that's $1 billion on top of the recently enacted Senate Bill 1 gas tax increase, which doubles the streets and roads fundings to local cities. This is a combination of maintenance as well as new capacity, and that's both formula-based funds that are made available to each and every city, including Newport, as well as competitive funds that are made available where we're trying to get the best projects to come forward. We score them, and we look at what the best traffic congestion relief projects are. So we're excited about that. And then on the freeway side, although we are quickly running out of space to build new freeways and new lanes, we do have a pretty large investment in the freeway system planned over the next 10 years, and that's about $4.3 billion. Half of that, roughly half of that, $1.9 billion, is the Interstate 405 Improvement Project, which is under construction now, which I'm going to spend a few more minutes in detail going through that. But we have an improvement on the 55 between the 405 and the 5. We are in the final design of that today. We will begin doing what we call right-of-way acquisition, which we have some property impacts, unfortunately, for private property impacts between the 5 and the 55. We'll begin making property offers on that this summer, and we plan to be in construction by 2021. That's 4 miles, and it will add a second carpool lane connecting the 55 from the 405 to the 5. We have awarded a construction contract to begin adding an additional lane from the on the I-5 South in South Orange County, from the 73 all the way up to El Toro Road. That will be done in 3 segments. All 3 segments will be coordinated over the course of the next 5 years. It'll be done by 2024. That's about $500 million of investment. And we just awarded a contract in the central part of the county, the I-5. Has anybody go to the Discovery Science Cube? Anybody ever get stuck in that HOV lane you can't get out of? Anybody like that? No one likes it, right? So we're redoing that. We're going to get rid of that drop ramp that is in the middle of the HOV drop ramp that was built in the early 90s, right there by the Discovery Science Cube. Remove some of that hard concrete barrier and add a second HOV lane through that area there. In fact, that HOV drop ramp is going to be closed to the public in the month of April and go into construction there. Related to that, our partner, the Department of Transportation, Caltrans, is going to be doing some work in the Orange Crush as well. The 22 eastbound to 5 southbound has a long concrete barrier, backs up quite a bit, and they're going to be redoing that concrete barrier and adding some capacity to the bridge there as well. So a lot of work around the Orange Crush coming up. Moving on, a big part of our sales tax measure also looked at how can we make sure that the transportation program is not adversely harming our environment. And previously, through a process working with the wildlife and environmental community, we've set aside and acquired 1,300 acres of open space for permanent mitigation of all of our freeway projects. Those have been acquired under very tight guidelines for biological diversity and biological resources, and we have set up an endowment to manage those properties in perpetuity, essentially. Our next thing here that we're focusing on is this idea of water quality, and water quality specifically tied to any impacts from the transportation system, runoff of the roadways. Obviously, there's 42 miles of coastline in Orange County, a lot of it right outside here, and we want to do our part to make sure that the impacts of transportation are mitigated to the extent possible. So we've set aside $40 million for upcoming water quality grants. Those will be competitive to local agencies like cities to help basically mitigate trash and runoff into the coastline. And then finally, $1 billion of capital investment into rail and transit service. On top of that, we are operating the existing bus service. That represents over a 10-year period about a $3 billion investment just to keep the existing bus service going, which I'll be talking about that in just a moment as well. So I mentioned a moment ago the recently enacted Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, known as SB1, or maybe more colloquially known as the gas tax. But I wanted to just talk about what it means to Orange County, and then maybe some of the risks we see going forward. The risk, putting aside the repeal effort and all of that at this point is behind us, but it does forecast about $52 billion of investment statewide over the next decade. And specifically in Orange County, our board was faced with reducing about 11% of our bus service just based upon the available dollars coming from the state to operate the bus service. We had taken significant steps to reduce the cost of the bus service. We contract out 40% of the bus service. We had reallocated services from unproductive areas to more productive areas. We had reduced the number of buses that we own and operate, but we still had an $18 million operating deficit, frankly, just based upon the way the funds flow from the state. SB1 erased that. So instead of having a discussion of reducing 11% of the bus service in Orange County, we were able to hold that steady. It does double local streets and roads funding to every city within the county plus the county, and it helps stabilize something known as the STIP, and that's the State Transportation Improvement Program, and that's the funding source that allows us to make highway investments outside of the Measure M program, and that's been a program that has been up and down over the years, and when I mean up and down, from $400 million to $50 million. So each and every year was really out of balance given prior to SB1. This really helps stabilize that. New sources of revenue to help us continue to operate Metrolink and Amtrak service in Orange County, Los Angeles, and San Diego. And then really builds upon the efforts that I talked about a moment ago with open space mitigation and water quality. There's some components to it there that we think is really good. The last thing is our county, like 20 other counties of the 58, have passed a half-cent local sales tax measure, and there is a program within the gas tax that incentivizes those of us who have done that. So if you've taxed yourself, there's a $200 million annual competitive funding source that you can dollar for dollar match against your existing funds. So the idea that if you taxed yourself for transportation improvements, you have a reward basis within that. With that, I think there's a few risks, and there's always risks in legislation and projects. And one of the things I think is just implementation. There is such a large backlog of simple things like pothole repair, deficient bridges, and paving. It's just a lot of work, and that work is occurring right now in a very, very low unemployment scenario within not only Orange County, but in all of Southern California. So labor prices are rising, labor availability is rising, or is dropping, and the cost of materials, concrete and steel in particular, are going up. guidelines and legislative changes, those are all the rules that the politicians want to make. And every time there's a new funding source in Sacramento, we always worry, particularly from the Orange County standpoint, that somebody's going to try to change the rules of the game. So we're always paying attention to that, and we just see that as a risk. And on behalf of the 34 cities within the county, we are spending a significant amount of time and resources monitoring and making sure that what was promised is delivered. So I want you to know, particularly at the city level, that if your city, whether it's Newport or any other city for that matter, needs help or resources or thoughts or strategies around making sure that the funds are available as planned, please let us know. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the 405 project. During the introduction, it was mentioned that this is the largest project in the agency's history, in Orange County's history, the I-405 improvement project. But it has a couple of other factoids as well. One is it's the largest design-build project in the state of California, and it's the second largest design-build project in the United States. And design-build is a method of project delivery where you do certain activities together. You're doing your engineering design work and you're doing your building in a cohesive, parallel process versus a linear process. And the idea is that you can save time and money. And on this project, we believe we're saving a little over $100 million in total cost. And probably more importantly to anybody that drives the 405 is we think we're saving 3 years on the construction schedule. So instead of a 16-mile, 8-year construction process, which would be sort of a normal time frame, unfortunately, for 16 miles and 18 bridges, we've compressed it to 5 years. That is a different way to manage it, and it's a different way to deliver it, but we're very happy about that. A couple of things about it is, besides it being a lot of money, it's a lot of work in a very constrained area in terms of the population. We've got 5 cities, about 1.1 million people along the corridor, not a lot of space to work. Just north of us, obviously, is Los Angeles County, which has another 10 million people, city of Long Beach, and a bunch of other activities there. But I think I'm going to start with this graph on the bottom. And current means what's out there today without construction impacts. To go the 16 miles in rush hour, our measurements have been, it's about 1 hour. So rush hour on the 405 has been about 60 minutes to go 16 miles. And our projections and our traffic modeling that we do for the long-range transportation plan is if we didn't do anything, if we just left what was there, and we go out to 2040, we look at our population increases, our job increases, our housing changes, we would see that 60-minute trip go up to about 120 minutes. So remember, that's 2 hours to go 16 miles. Trying to fit about 370,000 to 400,000 cars a day. That makes it one of the busiest sections of freeway, not only in Orange County, not only in California, but in the entire United States. So the I-5 is about 300,000 cars a day. The 91 is about 300,000 cars a day. This pushes 400,000 cars a day. It's a lot of cars. So the plan, which I'll talk about in just a moment, is when we're done, we want the regular lanes, or we forecast the regular lanes to be about 30 minutes to go end to end in rush hour. And if anyone chooses, or when people choose to use the express lanes, our goal is to have that 16-mile trip done in about 16 to 18 minutes. So at rush hour. So that's the benefit of the pricing and the tolling. So part of this is taking the existing system and trying to manage it better for the future. Because once we do this project here, we're not going to do it again. We're not going to come back in 10 or 15 years and say, we're going to add 2 more lanes to it. It's already 5 lanes today with an HOV lane in each direction. This will make it 6 lanes with 2 express toll lanes in the middle. 18 bridges will be rebuilt. 5 bridges will be modified. A new bridge will be built between the 73 and the 405. We're impacting 288 private properties. We're only acquiring one of those in its entirety at the request of the owner. All of the other ones are either temporary construction easements or what we call sliver acquisitions. We have 244 of those in our possession currently, meaning we can deliver those to the contractor for construction, and we have 44 more to go, and we're on our way to doing that. But the idea there is, why are we doing this? How do we keep pace with that future construction, with that future growth, and making sure that we're respectful of those stakeholders, those communities along the corridor, those property owners, but also acknowledge that for business to thrive and jobs to thrive and housing to exist, we need to make sure that the transportation system works better. So really the goal here is we're adding 2 lanes, one regular general purpose lane in each direction. We are creating the 405 express lanes in the middle of the corridor, and those will have tolls on them, which I'll talk about in just a quick moment. And then we're rebuilding each of those 18 bridges to what we call a master plan of arterial highway standards. And why that's important is that, anybody take the Slater Bridge in Fountain Valley before it was demolished a few months ago? So you would sort of have 4 lanes coming up to the bridge on each side, 2 in each direction. Then the bridge would narrow down, and then it would open back up on the other side. And when you were on that bridge, there were no sidewalks, there were no guardrails, there was no bike path. Well, now that bridge, when it's restored, it'll be built later this year, for example, by the end of 2019, the lane configuration will go all the way over the bridge, so you won't have a bottleneck. We'll have sidewalks on each side, we'll have proper bike lanes. So we're doing that to all 18 bridges. So the city traffic flow is going to work a lot better as well. And having that pedestrian access and active transportation access is going to be very good as well. I want to talk just very quickly about the toll policy, not prices, but I want to make sure that people know in the first 3.5 years, if you're a carpool with 3 or more, you're going to be able to ride in the express lanes for free. And in fact, after 3.5 years, if you're a carpool of 3 or more, you're going to be able to ride in the express lanes free all the time. So you'll need a transponder, but if you have a carpool of 3 or more, you'll travel for free. 2-person carpools, which is what we have out there today, in the peak hours, in the first 3.5 years, there will be a discounted toll, but it will be free in the off-peak hour. So this idea that we're going to transition over time into from 2-person carpools into 3-person carpools. And then after 3.5 years, both 2-person carpools as well as solo drivers will pay a toll on that. The reason I wanted to mention that is we're going to open the lanes in 2023, early 2023, and then in the middle of 2026 or the end of 2026 is when we would start phasing in the full tolls. So back to that stakeholder puzzle I had a moment ago, there was a lot of questions about how would I be impacted as a current HOV user. And one of the things we want to message out is that when we started the project in 2017, it was really a 10-year phase-in when you think about it, 10 years before 2-person carpools were going to be charged a toll. So now that's 8 years away, and we'll obviously, as we progress through construction, we want to message that out there and make sure people understand it. But one of the reasons that that is important is incentivizing carpools has a lot of benefit from an overall vehicle miles traveled, congestion reduction. A typical freeway has about 18% carpools. Think of the 5. If you go to an expressway like we have on the 91 express lanes, we're a little over 30% in carpools, and when you do the math on that, your vehicle miles traveled are down and your average occupancy is up, and the number of vehicle trips through the corridor are ultimately reduced. So we're very excited about that. We do have a lot of activity going out on the 405 right now. We just launched a new interactive app. If you type I-405 in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, it'll pop right up. It's free, and it's integrated with our construction schedules. It's integrated with Waze. Waze, I think a lot of you know what Waze is. This is the first public works project that has detour information officially integrated with Waze. We're very proud of that partnership, and it's populated each and every day with actual detours, construction schedules, and an interactive map. So I'd encourage you to download I-405 on the Apple Play or the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and use that as an opportunity to figure out what's going on over the next 4 years. So shifting, I'm going to talk a little bit about transit. I think about transit in Orange County sort of on post-recession and pre-recession. Pre-Great Recession in Orange County, we had about 70 million annual boardings on the bus system. We had 77 routes. We had seen double-digit growth for many years in transit ridership within Orange County and on the transit system. And that all changed post-recession. Where we find ourselves today is about 48 million annual boardings. We've reduced about 22% of the service. At one point, we laid off 440 employees at OCTA as part of the recession. The recession hit a lot of industries very hard. It hit transportation very hard as well. But the other thing that happened post-recession is the makeup of our jobs in Orange County changed, and the makeup of our riders changed. So of those 48 million people that ride the bus every year, we don't have everybody's name and address, but we have a pretty good subset of about 100,000 or so. And we surveyed them, and we asked them, why don't you ride the bus anymore? Very simply, why don't you ride the bus anymore? Two answers. Fully 40% of them said, I don't live in Orange County anymore. It's too expensive, or my job went away, and I don't live here anymore. 36% said, I got access to a cheap used car because now my job has changed and I can't ride the bus because I don't have a regular 8 to 5 job, or I don't have a shift, I'm doing a gig economy type thing. So we have this changing dynamic. So if holding that as sort of a baseline, and there's other things going on in that as well, but those are the two big things. Holding that as a baseline, we said, well, we need to figure out what the transit system of our future is versus the transit system of our past. And that future really resulted in us going forward in 2015, and our board of directors adopted a program that we playfully called OC Bus 360. The idea of a circle has 360 degrees, and we wanted to look at the bus system from all angles. And we wanted to look at everything from what the customer was, which I just talked about a moment ago, some of our target demographics in terms of what we're trying to do and be much more targeted in our promotions about service. We wanted to match needs with demand, and that idea right there in the sense that not every community needs a 40-foot bus every 10 minutes. The ones that do, we should provide that. But if they don't need it, we should provide something they do need. And something, whether it's an on-demand service, a partnership with a transportation network company like an Uber or a Lyft, or some other things there, community shuttles, things of that nature. We wanted to optimize the service. So we didn't cut any hours of service that we were delivering, but we measure service delivery on an hourly basis. We have 1.6 million annual hours, and we redistributed those. So we put more hours in the central part of the county, which was much more transit-centric, and less hours in maybe the eastern part of the county or the southern part of the county, and offered up some different solutions there. Use of technology has been a big issue as well in terms of real-time information, mobile app payment, and the opportunity to directly communicate with customers. And we wanted to hold fares steady. We haven't raised fares since 2013, and our current plan adopted by our board is to look at fares again in 2024. So this idea of keeping the fares steady there. With that, we've been able to sort of stem the declining ridership growth on the bus system. It's relatively stable. And the routes that we made improvements to, which are largely in the center part of the county, Santa Ana, Garden Grove, Anaheim, Fullerton, parts of Huntington Beach, parts of Westminster, we've seen ridership up as much as 16%. So this idea where if you put a good service out that people understand and does what they need it to do, they will ride it. And then by the same token, under the Measure M program, we've been able to offer cities opportunities to create local shuttles that work for them. Whether it's San Clemente, Dana Point, Newport, Huntington Beach, we've made a competitive program available for local community circulator shuttles. Again, that idea of matching ridership with demand. So there's two specific projects that I think you might find some interest in. One is very small, one is a little bit bigger. The small one is what we term microtransit in the transportation industry. We've branded it OC Flex, and microtransit is this idea that you have a very small space, a small geographic area, and you use technology to make it an on-demand service. So I'm sure by a show of hands, many people are familiar with Uber and Lyft, right? So we don't want to be Uber and Lyft. We don't want to compete with Uber and Lyft, but I think the idea of leveraging the private sector technology development was very helpful to us. And by that I mean we have two pilot zones, one in the northerly part of Huntington Beach and part of Westminster, and one in South Orange County in Aliso Viejo, Mission Viejo, parts of Laguna Niguel. We're using technology. We've geofenced roughly a 5 square miles, not a perfect square, but 5 square miles. And if you're within that zone and you download the OC Flex app and you create an account, you can have an on-demand van service pick you up door to door. So it's $4.50 for unlimited rides during the day. It's a passenger van. It is painted in blue and orange, says OC Flex on the side. It's got a driver that meets all the required state and federal drug testing, alcohol testing, and background checking, which means you can also have someone that is 13 years or older. They don't have to be 18 years or older. So you can have a teenager on there. And it's a shared ride environment. So we started that in October, and we're testing 2 zones. One has a commuter rail station in it in South Orange County. The other one doesn't. We're trying to figure out and see how people connect to rail, how they connect to other transit. We've now had about 12,000 rides, and most of those are a length of about 1.8 miles. So this idea of short trips. The average wait time is less than 12 minutes, and the average trips per week by the users are between 2 and 3. And probably more importantly, more than 50% of the people that use the service have access to an automobile. So these are people that are consciously choosing to do something a little bit different to get where they're going. So we're very excited about that. It's using that, again, that private sector technology and leveraging it into a public transit space. And then on the other part of the county, in Santa Ana, on November 30th, we officially broke ground on a light rail transit project known as OC Streetcar. It will connect the Santa Ana Metrolink and Amtrak station, which is one of the top 3 busiest stations, not only in Orange County, but in Southern California. Significant traffic, passenger traffic between Metrolink and Amtrak. About 8.5 million people a year ride the rail line between San Diego and Los Angeles. A lot of activity there. We'll connect there. You'll be able to get off an Amtrak train or a Metrolink train, walk through the station, connect to the streetcar vehicle, which you see here, and that will take you into the Civic Center area. And if you haven't been to the Civic Center area recently, there's a lot of activity, new development as it relates to the county Civic Center. There's about 22,000 total employees in that area. Outside of Disneyland, that's Orange County's single largest employment concentration anywhere in the county. It'll make its way across the river and terminate at Harbor Boulevard in Westminster. And why that's important is Harbor Boulevard is OCT's busiest bus route. We have about 12,000 riders a day riding on Harbor Boulevard. And over that 4 miles between the Santa Ana train station and Harbor Boulevard, we connect with 18 of OCTA's busiest bus routes. The rail line is forecasted by the Federal Transit Administration, so not OCTA, but the Federal Transit Administration, to carry about 7,300 passengers daily. The price to ride it will be the same as the bus, and your ticket between the rail and the bus will be fully interchangeable. And if you come in on Metrolink, there's no cost to transfer directly to the rail line. We received a $148 million discretionary grant from a competitive program at the federal level. It was the first one awarded under the Trump administration and the first one awarded to a technology which is called modern streetcar. So we're very excited about that. Construction is underway. If you're in Santa Ana, down in the Civic Center area, you're going to see a lot of utility line relocation going on, sewer line. It's our oldest city in the county. A lot of things underground to be moved, and vehicles are under construction. They're being built in Sacramento by a company named Siemens. So they're built in California, and those vehicles should be delivered by the end of 2020, and testing in 2021 with revenue service open to the public in early 2022. So with that, I'm going to stop for a moment. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I've talked about today or any other question on anyone's mind about transportation. All right, well, thank you. Get out of the way here. Thanks.
Well, we all enjoy and probably take for granted our mobility that we have. I hope from this morning's presentation you see that nothing is simple, that it's a very complex, involved, and it's going to get more expensive. So lessons of the day. We thank you for coming, and before everyone runs away, it's my job to try to hold you in your seats for the most exciting part of the morning. And it's this guy that's standing to my left, once back up here.
Very good. Great presentation, Darrell. We really appreciate that. Very dynamic organization that you run there with all the moving parts, no pun intended. Next Wake Up Newport is May 2nd, and our speaker is Daniele Strupa, the president of Chapman University. The guy's a great speaker, super, what I wouldn't expect to be of a university president. The guy's just a real happy kind of guy, and for those of you in DECA, you'll probably, how many of you are seniors here? Okay, so you've already made your college decisions or pretty much getting ready to do that. But for the rest of you, Chapman would be a great alternative. You can come and hear from Daniele. So thank you all for coming. Have a great week. If you're not a member of the Newport Beach Chamber, you should be.